Hi everyone, so this video I'm going to talk about why I use dead fishes in my videos and how I use them in fish keeping in general. So these are a lot of the fish I'll show in the video, unless it's in water, it's preserved. And a lot of people get all crazy about, especially on my Instagram and Facebook, if I post specimens, some are historical ones. People will go absolutely crazy about whether they've been out of water too long and whether they're dead and how they got this way. So all of mine in my collection are preserved in alcohols and they're collected ethically. So all of mine are preserved in in ethanol, which is the same alcohol that you drink with. Some people preserve their fishes and animals in isopropene, I think is, and some people use methanol. I just prefer ethanol because it's cheaper and it does the same job. I think it's quite stable. And they're firstly fixed in formulas. So this method is, well, these are wet specimens or spirit collection specimens. Well, they're in spirits, meaning alcohols. And this is not traditional taxidermy, but I use the word taxidermy in more layman terms. Taxidermy is generally stuffing, using skins on top of another thing. So I have more of these than I have of live fish, easily. All of these are usually donated to me, or I find them and I've been given permission to use them. So none have been killed for the process, and a lot of people involved in taxidermy and vulture culture will use this sort of, they will not kill the animal for it unless it's been killed for culling and stuff like that, which you'll see especially with, I guess, livestock or anything farmed, selectively bred animals. But all of mine have not been using that method. These have just died in natural sort of processes. So the first reason I really why I find dead fish so useful is the pathology aspect. If you lose a fish and you don't know how or why, then it's a good idea to actually take a look at it. If it's so far decayed that I would say you wouldn't use it in taxidermy in this sort of way. So you want something that is at least it looks like what it is. So it's going to drip a lot. But this is Barium citrus xanthellus. You want something that's pretty much intact. But the longer it's been dead, the more that bacteria, fungi and other organisms will start to decay it. So it will reduce the use of what you can do with their their individual. But I always take a first look at it. If it looks bloated, well, first think about how long has it been dead. If it's been dead a while, then there's probably gases building up and liquids and sort of inflating the shape of the animal. And then I would say it's possible, if you really have no idea of how it's died, take a look inside. So I actually have a dissection kit, and I find this really useful, but you can use kitchen scissors. They're quite blunt, if you get what I mean, they're not to a point. So my dissection kit, there's two tweezers there. My scalpel has no blade in because I rarely use it. But these scissors are quite sharp, and that's what I use to take a look inside. And I do the first cut from the anus from the anus all the way up to that ridge above the head. This is going to be a really grim photo for people that have seen really and if people have seen really dodgy mummifies, this is worse. But I always cut, if I'm doing a fish like this, from there, usually breaking this, I say it's pelvic, isn't it? Pelvic area. Breaking that all the way up to here and then opening up. That will give you the biggest view of the internals. Then you can look at the organs themselves. With fish like discus and stuff like that, you would open it via the side and go in that way. But there's so much you can tell from looking internally. And you don't always need a microscope. You can look at, if you use references, you can by learning more about the internal anatomy of a fish, you can then locate what might be a bit abnormal, such as the swim bladder could be really overinflated, or it could be totally deflated, or it could be other things. like it's displaced. So those are probably issues in goldfish you'll see most often. But then you've got other things. So you could be looking at the size of the liver, whether there's any sort of decay to the liver. You could be looking at the gills, opening up that gill plate and maybe taking the gills out. Putting gills under microscopes, while you might see a lot of decay microbes over a period of time, you probably see stuff like other parasites. There's plenty of others like gill flukes, I think gill maggots. I think white spot can take residence up there, and that's why it's so useful to look at the gills as well. They should be red and generally not too bad, but then they shouldn't have any dead spots, but this will change with time. You can also take a look at other organs, and also whether the fish is fat with eggs, and then maybe thinking, is it egg bound? Look at digestive system, is so useful. If it has air bubbles and stuff like that, maybe the fish was not constipated, it had bloat of some kind, so it couldn't digest. If there's air generally in the abdomen, that could hint at other things. It's generally when you're first dissecting things, you'll probably hit the digestive tract, so it's not so useful in that aspect. But actually looking at if the digestive tract has leaked into the actual abdomen itself, and that can be quite a rapid death. So there's so much you can learn just from initial death, and you don't even have to go any further. You don't have to go to level of having a collection like this big. But generally a lot of people, I don't know why, can't deal with, well, I do know why, because it is a bit creepy in a way when you have sort of these sort of things. Like I've got that's a pig jaw, fox jaw, is that rabbit? I think that was rabbit, maybe it was rat. I've got a label on it, so that should give it away. Rabbit. You don't have to go to the extent of having so many creepy things in the house. A lot of people get creeped out by different things. I don't think I could deal with annelids being preserved, but I've walked past them, I just don't like them. Or maggots, flies and stuff like that, but some people do. And it's useful in other aspects. So when you're actually looking at these specimens and alcohols, these are preserved, as I said, in ethanol. They're fixed in formalin, which is really toxic. I leave them in for a week, and I do not actually, you have to use a respirator if the formalin is opened up. Well, if it's in the air itself, in the well ventilated spot, you have to wear gloves. It's very carcinogenic. So I don't recommend it for everyone. And all of these jars are airtight to stop alcohol evaporating. And I leave, well, fishes in around a week depending on the size. Invertebrates might be different, like I've got over here is a very cool squid. He was about half a week, because you probably wouldn't even need to leave him in formalin at all. Focus. And I found him actually in frozen food for fishes. He was in mysis, and it's the second one I found. I've actually got another in the freezer, ready for when I want to preserve it. And the useful thing about these is I find the colour loss itself, because the formalin, and over time they will lose their colour. But that means you have to look at other ways to identify the fishes, and that's so useful if you get other colour variants, or even just because colour can be so deceptive, males or females of fish, it helps you focus on other things when you're identifying a species or sexing them. And many species are described not of the live animal, they're described of specimens. They're preserved because you want type specimens to describe them against. So you have these guys, and this alcohol's so stained it just looks like a black jar of black. It's just like a jar of death. But they are extremely useful in comparing, and a lot of things you can't do with the live specimens, such as count the fin rays more accurately, or for the anal fin especially, or look at other features in the fish. So I always think it's worth looking at different aspects, or even if you have an interest in taxidermy, don't be afraid to do it. There's nothing wrong with having an interest in taxidermy. And maybe if you're interested in reptiles, maybe you can always ask, maybe some pet stores might be able to give you things if they do pass and stuff like that. and they are incredibly, I think, useful as a fish keeper to understand a lot about form and function and morphology. And if you've seen those in my videos, you'll notice that I use these guys to explain morphology mostly, but that's why I specialise in morphology and evolution and phylogenetics, taxonomy. So these are what I use. But anyway, thank you for watching. I probably ramble on too much if I'm not careful. This is just a few things. This is Panaclus albivermis. He's in one of the first videos I used of specimens. These are just different Baroncistris. Luckily they've held their spots and I know them. None of these are labelled and they need to be labelled, but I know most of these by their size and shape, so I can identify the different L numbers. So Pymnodus pictus, got a rainbow boa, can't remember, I've done several. Panaclus vermis. This is the albino sterlet, jar of death, which is different ranunculuses. You can't really see any of it, but I've done a video with specimens from that jar. Squid, and this is, I love the Kilner jars because they feel so sturdy and their shape is absolutely, but these are Platystachys cotylophorus, and they're just, I think, well, they're just interesting and I use them. They're partially decoration as well, but I'd rather any specimen that I would not have use of, and if anything were to happen, I'll donate these anyway to a museum where they can provide really good scientific use. Scientific studies could use a lot of specimens, maybe not even for species descriptions or stuff like that, or evolution, just because aquarium specimens, when it comes to species descriptions, generally aren't of so much use. But when it comes to you could be looking at studies of how captivity changes morphology, how things have changed over time in captivity and stuff like that really. But anyway, thank you for watching and I'll do some more videos in the meantime.